They say the egg is a symbol of life. But in a 1942 village near Kursk, an egg was a symbol of survival. When the German front approached, when bread was hidden under beds and milk became a rarity, only the chickens remained. Simple, Russian, smoky gray, with red combs. Household angels, as the old folks called them. Back then, there was no commercial feed, no automatic waterers or vitamins in packets. There was only the earth, ash, and grain that had to be conjured almost out of thin air. People understood what seems like science today. To make a hen lay, you must understand her as a family member. In the 1950s, as the village rose after the war, every yard had chicken coops made from whatever materials were at hand. In Belarus, they were built right against the barns so the cows' warmth would keep them cozy in winter. In Kazakhstan, they dug into the ground, making warm earthen bunkers. In Central Asia, they plastered them with clay to keep them cool. They didn't know the word biosystem there, but they knew a chicken doesn't like drafts. Everything was built on observation, on respect. In those years, chickens saved people from starvation. One egg is 6 g of protein and 5 g of fat. That is a day of life for a child. The village held on because of those 6 grams. Now look at the supermarket shelves. The eggs are uniform and identical, as if they were printed, and they taste like cardboard. Why? Because there is no life in those eggs. There is only statistics. The hen that lays them lives under lamps, never sees the sun, and doesn't know what the earth is. She isn't given grain, she's given formulas. She isn't given space, she's given a cage. And here is the paradox. The more we learned about the biochemistry of the egg, the further we move from its essence. In the old notebooks of agronomists from Vologda, you can find entries like, "The bird requires sun and freedom." Today, industrial farm instructions read, "Light, 16 hours a day, ration, 120 kilograms of compound feed with 17% protein." Everything is precise, everything is rational, but a chicken is not a machine. She is alive. Why then did the villagers of the past achieve miraculous results without laboratories or premixes? Because they knew that feed is not a formula, but a conversation. Hay, nettles, kitchen scraps, a little grain, calcium from ash, everything was used. And most importantly, the cycles of nature. In spring, greens; in summer, insects; in autumn, grain; in winter, root vegetables. There was harmony in this, and now a bit of science. To lay one egg, a hen uses nearly 10% of the calcium in her body. Without calcium, no shell forms. Without methionine and lysine, protein isn't synthesized. These amino acids are found in legumes, sunflower cake, and even simple clover hay. That's why villagers used to dry grass not just for cows but for chickens. Vitamin D is needed for calcium absorption, and chickens got it naturally by walking in the sun. Today it's added to feed from chemical concentrates, but the effectiveness is lower. Nature does it better than a laboratory. It's not for nothing they say, nature cannot be patented. That is precisely why these old methods have vanished from store shelves. They don't turn a profit. They can't be packaged into a brand. The industry doesn't sell knowledge, it sells dependency. A chicken raised the old-fashioned way costs pennies but produces a product no factory can replicate. So today, when they tell us, "Buy premium-grade compound feed," I smile. My grandmothers didn't know the word premium, but they knew the shells had to be crushed in a mortar and given to the birds. That is science just without the packaging. If you want your chickens to lay like in the old days, start with the simple things. Give them day and night, not 16 hours of light or infrared lamps, but a real sunrise and sunset. Give them grain and greens, not just pellets. Let them scratch in the dirt and look for worms. That's how they get enzymes that aren't in any commercial feed. Add some ash to the sand. It's an ancient disinfection method and a source of micronutrients. And most importantly, observe. A chicken will show you what she needs. When she pecks the ground, she's looking for minerals. When she spreads her wings in the sun, she's treating herself for parasites. When she's silent, something is wrong. This is the language of nature, and we have forgotten how to understand it. But it can be brought back. You just have to watch. We've forgotten that knowledge isn't what you read in a manual, but what is passed down through hands and heart. That's why I say, Return to the chicken coop not as if it were a shed, but as if it were a temple. For there, under the wings of an ordinary hen, ancient alchemy is hidden. Knowledge only survives if we pass it on. The next vault will open soon. When I first wondered why Grandpa Grigory's chickens from the Smolensk region laid even in December, even when the frost crackled like dry branches, I realized the old folks knew what we now call biorhythms. They didn't have thermometers or humidity sensors, but they felt the balance. Grigory used to say, "A chicken is like a person. She needs light, food, and peace in her soul. If any of that is missing, the egg disappears with it." Back then I didn't understand, but years later, after dozens of experiments, I realized it's all about energy, not metaphorically, but physically. Every egg is a miniature biolaboratory. To form a shell, a hen's oviduct triggers a reaction where calcium binds with carbonate, and this takes up to 22 hours of cellular labor. Without phosphorus and vitamin D3, this process stops, and the hen starts cutting back on production. That's why old peasants always kept troughs with ash and crushed shells. Not because someone told them to, but because they observed. If you don't give them ash, the shell becomes brittle. This is rural science, not recorded in journals, but tested over centuries. Let's be honest. What they call industrial poultry farming today is a conveyor belt with a biological face. The light isn't sunlight, it's artificial. The air isn't fresh, it's filtered. The feed isn't food, it's a mixture of 40 components where there's less natural stuff than there is paper in a pack of cigarettes. A hen lives for 500 days, then goes under the knife. In the village, a hen lived for 7-8 years, and even as an old bird, she would lay at least once a week. Why? Because she didn't burn out. Stress, overload, monotony, these are the three whips of the industry. When I decided to restore my grandfather's methods in 2015, it all started with the feed. I put together a ration I called the Living Trio: grain, greens, and protein. Grain is energy. I use a mix of 40% wheat, 30% corn, 20% oats, and a bit of barley. Corn provides fats and carotenoids. Those are exactly what color the yolk, that rich orange that you can't fake. Wheat and oats contain B vitamins, especially B2 and B6, which are needed for metabolism. But grain is only the beginning. The second part is greens. In spring and summer, I give them alfalfa, nettles, dandelions, plantain, even carrot tops. In dried form, finely cut hay. A handful of nettles has more iron than a pharmacy supplement, and this prevents anemia, which makes chickens stop laying. Alfalfa is rich in beta-carotene and methionine, a key amino acid for forming egg whites. I observed how 2 weeks after adding alfalfa, my hen's shells became thicker to the touch. The third component is protein. On Soviet subsidiary farms, they used meat and bone meal or fish scraps. Today, you can replace this with boiled beans, sunflower cake, or worm and larvae meal. Yes, it sounds unappetizing, but biochemistry doesn't lie. Without lysine and threonine, a hen cannot maintain her laying rate. And don't forget about sulfur. It's needed for feather growth in the synthesis of cysteine, an amino acid responsible for the health of the skin and beak. Natural sources of sulfur include garlic, onions, and cabbage. Now about water. Many people think chickens drink very little. In reality, they drink constantly, just a little at a time. I've measured it. Up to 250 milliliters of water goes into one egg. If the water is warm, cloudy, or contains chlorine, the bird's body literally shuts down production. Village grandmothers would put a bucket in the shade and drop a silver spoon or a piece of charcoal in it. A simple filter. Today I do the same. I put in activated charcoal or add a few drops of apple cider vinegar. It acidifies the water, improving gut flora. And now pay attention. Light. This is no small detail. Light is a signal of life. A hen needs 14 to 16 hours of light, but not just any light. I've tried different bulbs, from cold LEDs to old incandescent bulbs. The result is the same, only warm, soft light of 2700, 3000 kelvins avoids causing stress. My system is simple. A timer turns the lamp on an hour before dawn and turns it off 8 hours after. This way, the bird lives by the sun, not the factory. But even perfect light and feed won't help if the hen is stressed. I've noticed that a single visit from a neighbor's dog is enough to make egg production drop by a third the next day. In nature, stress is a danger signal, and the body immediately slows down all secondary functions, including reproduction. Therefore, peace is not a luxury, but part of the technology. I surround the chicken coop with a hedge of raspberries and elderberries. I install a protective mesh against predators. Inside, there is cleanliness, silence, and the smell of dry grass. This isn't aesthetics, it's biochemistry. Now, a bit about micronutrients: iron for blood, copper for feathers, manganese for shell formation. One of the oldest secrets of village farms is adding small pebbles and ash to the feed. Stones help grind the food, while ash supplies the body with potassium, magnesium, calcium, and even iodine. I take ash from a wood-burning stove, only from unpainted wood, and add a handful per bucket of feed. The result: clean feathers, shiny combs, and hard shells. There is another trick: fermentation. My grandmother from Podolia called it living feed. Grain is soaked in warm water for a day or two until a light sour smell appears. This isn't spoilage, it's lactic acid fermentation, which increases the B vitamin content and makes the feed easier to digest. Fermented oats or wheat are a natural probiotic. After switching to this scheme, I noticed that intestinal diseases disappeared and the eggs became denser. And finally, philosophy. When you keep chickens not for profit but for life, everything changes. You begin to notice the little things: how they call to one another, how they build a hierarchy, how the old hens teach the young ones to find worms. These aren't just birds, they are a community, small but wise. I realize that chickens are our first teachers in biosynergy. We feed them, and they feed us. We give them space, and they give us back balance. And you know what's most ironic? Everything I've just told you cannot be sold. You can't patent the sun, you can't certify nettles, you can't put a barcode on love for the land. That's why the industry relies on substitutes, on control, on standardization. They don't need a wise hen, they need a predictable one. But I choose a living one. If you want to repeat my experience, start small. Build a chicken coop not out of boards, but out of your respect for the bird. Let it be dry and draft-free, but with a window facing east. Set up 2 waterers, one in the shade and one near the exit. Provide sand and ash baths. Add greens every day, even in winter. You can sprout grain on a windowsill. Don't be afraid to experiment. Nature is the best consultant. And most importantly, keep records. How did the old collective farm poultry workers do it? Write down how many eggs a day, in what weather, with what feed. After a month, you will see patterns. This is real science. Not laboratory-based, but living. Every egg in your nest is a letter from the past, from the times when knowledge wasn't sold but passed down, when people knew the value of grain, sun, and silence. Return to this, because autonomy doesn't start with a generator, but with a hen laying her first egg under your window. The next vault will open soon. When I first heard an old poultry farmer from the Poltava region say, "Don't keep chickens if you don't know their grandmothers," I thought it was a joke, but it turned out to be a formula for survival. In village breeding, there were no microscopes or laboratories, but there was observation over generations. People knew which hens stayed quiet on the nest, which ones laid in the frost, and which ones weren't afraid of the rain. It was breeding not by pedigree, but by character. And this is more important than it seems, because an egg isn't just the result of nutrition. It's the outcome of harmony between the bird's body, psyche, and heritage. Modern industry relies on crosses. Hybrids like Lohmann Brown or Highline are bred for maximum egg production. Yes, they give up to 320 eggs a year, but only under ideal conditions and factory-formulated feed. Remove the lamp or drop the temperature, and the whole system collapses. These chickens are like athletes on doping. Without stimulants, they lose their form. But old breeds like the Russian White, Yurlov Crower, Kuchin Jubilee, or Ukrainian Ushanka may produce less but do so stably, naturally, and without stress. Their eggs are denser and the birds are resilient. Why is this important? Because it is resistance to stress and climate that is the key factor for an autonomous farm. In Siberia, Yurlovs lay even at -15, provided their combs don't freeze. In Central Asia, under the scorching sun, local Araucanas and Uzbek game fowl hold up better. They have strong immunity, even if they lay fewer eggs. The secret isn't in a miracle, but in adaptation. Every breed carries the genetic code of its land. It's like cultural heritage, only in feathers. Now, a bit of biology. What makes one hen an egg machine and another a lazy broody? It's all decided by hormones. The pituitary gland produces luteinizing hormone, which triggers ovulation, and the hypothalamus regulates this according to daylight. That is why light and peace are sacred conditions. But that's not all. Amino acids affect the laying rate: methionine, lysine, tryptophan. Without them, protein synthesis is disrupted. Feathers turn dull, combs turn pale. Natural sources: sunflower meal, peas, lupine. Boiled eggs. Yes, they were even fed back to them. A closed nutrient cycle. Old housewives knew that a hen eats herself if she lacks protein. Hence the ancient custom of giving her fish or milk scraps. Protein isn't just food, it's a brick for eggs. A hen that doesn't get enough protein stops laying, even if she has light and space. Biochemistry without poetry is simple. One egg contains about 6 grams of protein. To create it, a bird must daily absorb at least 16% protein by weight of her feed. This isn't a guess. It's the physics of life. And now for the feed culture. In Soviet subsidiary plots, there was a term mishanka. It's a mixture of boiled root vegetables, bran, and greens. The base: potatoes, carrots, beets. Potatoes provide starch and energy, carrots, beta-carotene, beets, fiber. They added a little salt, flour, and calcium, usually crushed shells or chalk. They served it as a warm, slightly moist, but not runny mash. That is exactly how they did it in the Kurgan, Kostroma, and Brest regions. Everywhere, people kept chickens for their families, not for a report. Today, this has been forgotten, replaced entirely by dry compound feed. But the body of a bird, like that of a human, loves living food. By the way, about salt. Myth: salt is harmful to chickens. False. Without sodium, the electrolyte balance is disrupted. Feathers molt, appetite drops. But dosage is important. 0.3, 0.4% of the ration. Simply put, a pinch per bucket of feed. In the old days, they just added salty water from pickles, enzymes, microorganisms, and minerals all in one bottle. A natural electrolyte, as they would say now. Now let's talk about enemies. Parasites, mites, worms, the 3 executioners of any farm. In Soviet villages, there was a simple but brilliant method: the sand and ash bath. In an old trough, they mixed ash, dry earth, and a bit of sulfur. The chickens bathed, shook out their feathers, and cleaned themselves. No insecticides. For worms, pumpkin seeds and onions. The seeds contain cucurbitine, a natural anti-parasitic agent. 2 weeks of such supplements and the problem vanishes. Everything is natural. Everything is accessible. But let's get back to economics. Why did all this disappear? The answer is simple: because it's not profitable to sell knowledge. The feed industry exists not so you can get eggs, but so you buy feed. They create dependency. A product that can be produced in a garden becomes a value-added commodity, and we lose our freedom. Nature cannot be patented, which means you cannot collect rent on it. Therefore, old survival methods were replaced by marketing. Vitamin premix, immunomodulating concentrate, all these words hide something simple. They convinced you that without them, a chicken won't survive. But she survived for thousands of years before this. Take the 1970s, for example. In the collective farms of Ukraine and Russia, with a population of 15-20 chickens per household, the average laying rate was 180-200 eggs per year. No lamps, no premixes, no additives. Why? Because every hen had her own yard, grass under her feet, and grain in her crop. Today, in industrial conditions with all the technology, 280 eggs, but at what price? The bird lives for a year, then it's culled. A plastic egg instead of a living one. Now a bit about climate. In arid regions, Astrakhan, southern Kazakhstan, chickens reduce feed intake in the heat to avoid overheating. This is a physiological mechanism. You can help simply more shade, more water, and feeding in the evening when it's cool. In cold regions, it's the opposite. The morning feed should be more caloric. Add corn and a little lard. Yes, lard, finely chopped. Energy and warmth. Old Siberian housewives even made a fatty mash using fish broth. The result? The chickens don't freeze and don't get sick. There is also a seasonal phenomenon, molting. When a bird loses feathers, she spends enormous resources restoring them. More protein is used than for egg laying. During this period, don't strain the hen. Let her rest. Increase protein, seeds, peas, egg white. Add B vitamins. In 3 weeks, a new bird will return with shiny plumage and new strength. And another thing, observation is your best tool. The old folks said, a chicken doesn't speak, but she shows. Lethargic with a lowered tail, intestinal problems, pale comb, anemia, a comb with a blue tint, harder lungs, small cracks on the shell, lack of calcium or vitamin D. It's all visible if you look. This isn't magic, it's literacy. And finally, the philosophy of autonomy. In a world where everything is measured by numbers, the chicken remains the last link in the living chain between man and the earth. She turns grass, insects, and sunlight into food that can be stored for months. This isn't just a bird, it's a biological battery. Every egg is a concentrate of the sun's energy, processed through the organism of a living being. This is a miracle we've grown accustomed to. Returning to roots doesn't mean living in the past. It means building a future without dependency. A chicken doesn't require technology, she requires attention. Listen to her, feed her honestly, create conditions for her, and she will repay you with golden protein. That is how our ancestors did it. That is how villages survived in times of war and drought. And as long as there is a chicken in the yard, the village lives. The next vault will open soon. Every dawn on the farm begins the same way. And in this, my friends, is hidden a great secret: stability. Chickens live not by a calendar, but by a rhythm. If you've ever watched a flock wake up, you've seen that everything goes according to schedule. The roosters crow, a light rustle, the first steps toward the exit, the check-in, and only then breakfast. To break this order is to destroy the system. I once specifically conducted an experiment. I delayed opening the chicken coop by 2 hours. The result, 30% fewer eggs that day. Why? Because of stress. And stress is the off switch for instinct. In the industry, they don't understand this. They regulate everything with numbers, while a chicken lives by biorhythms like the sun and the rain. Therefore, rule number 1, consistency. Feeding, light, cleaning, everything on the clock. In Soviet subsidiary plots, there were even special signs: morning feeding, 6, evening feeding, 18 in Inars. This wasn't bureaucracy, it was rhythm. When a bird knows that her day repeats, she feels safe. And where there is safety, there is an egg. Now more about feeding. I've worked out a formula: clean, filling, diverse. Clean means no mold, no soured leftovers. Once a week, I completely clean the feeders and waterers, scald them with boiling water, and dry them in the sun. This is simple prevention against bacteria and fungi. Filling means a balance of energy and protein. In the morning, a grain mix. In the afternoon, a moist mash with greens. In the evening, corn and some seeds. Why so? In the morning, energy is needed for the start. In the afternoon, for recovery. In the evening, for warmth at night. Diverse is the key to vitamins. The more colors on the feeding table, the stronger the health. Greens, carrots, beets, apples, zucchini, even nettles. Everything is used, especially in winter. A secret additive is sprouted grain. Grandmothers in the Volga region knew this one. Grain is soaked in water for a day, then kept under a damp cloth for 2 to 3 days until tiny sprouts appear. At that moment, its content of vitamins E, B2, B6, and enzymes that improve digestion increases. I give about 50, 70 grain per hen, and within a week I notice feathers become smooth, combs redden, and the eggs are brighter. Now about lighting. Many people think it's enough to just put in a bulb and be done with it. Mistake. The light should be not just long, but right. In nature, the sun rises slowly and sets slowly, so a lamp with a timer should turn on and off gradually, using a dimmer or just a warm bulb first, then a bright one later. A sudden turn on is a shock, especially for young hens. And shock is the enemy of egg laying. Temperature is also a factor. The optimum is 18 to 22 degrees Celsius. Below 5 degrees, chickens start using energy not for the egg, but for warmth. Above 30, they stop eating to avoid overheating. Therefore, ventilation is no less important than insulation. I put an exhaust on the roof and a small window under the shelf. Air should move, but not roam. A draft kills, but air movement heals. Humidity, 60–70%. If it's higher, ammonia from the droppings irritates the breath. If it's lower, mucous membranes dry out and appetite drops. The old folks solved this simply. They threw in fresh branches or a bit of damp straw, a natural regulator. Now about space. Each hen should have at least half a square meter in the coop and 2 to 3 square meters in the run. This is not a luxury, it's health. In cramped conditions, cannibalism begins. Chickens peck at each other out of boredom. On factories, this horror is solved by beak trimming, but in a private plot, it's solved by giving them space and things to do. I put out stumps, stones, and old boards so the birds can look for insects and scratch the ground. This isn't a toy, it's psychotherapy, nests. Many people think any bucket will do. No, a nest is like a temple of motherhood. It should be in the shade, with soft bedding. Straw or sawdust is best. One nest for every 3 hens is the ideal balance. I add a bit of dry lavender or wormwood. It repels parasites and gives off a pleasant scent. The hen feels comfortable and returns to the same nest again. The perch is a vital element. A hen sleeps at a height to feel safe. The bar should be smooth, 4–5 centimeter in diameter, not metal. Metal makes the legs cold. The distance between the rungs should be 35–40 centimeters so tails don't get dirty. Simple geometry, but it decides the fate of sleep. Now about health. An old veterinarian from Bryansk once told me, the chief doctor of the chicken coop is the owner's conscience. And he was right. Diseases don't come from outside, but from indifference. Once a week, inspect the combs, eyes, and feathers. Any change is a signal. A pale comb, anemia or stress, a hen breathing heavily, check the ventilation, a tucked-in neck, a cold. It's all simple if you look. Disinfection without chemicals. I use 9% vinegar and ash. Floors with a vinegar solution, walls with an ash infusion. This is an ancient method from collective farm times. It works flawlessly. And in spring and autumn, a general cleaning, remove the bedding, dry it out, bake it in the sun. There is an important detail, the timing of egg collection. If you leave eggs in the nest for too long, chickens start pecking at them. Instinct. So collect them in the morning and afternoon, and always leave one dummy egg, it can be wooden. This way, the hens feel that the place is active. Now about seasonal changes. Spring. The bird's organism moves into peak activity. Increased protein, oil cake, fish, boiled beans. Summer. More greens, less grain to avoid overheating. Autumn. Strengthen immunity. Carrots, beets, apples, garlic. Winter. Add corn and fats. Slightly increase the daylight hours. Everything is cyclical, like an annual calendar. Don't forget about vitamins. Natural sources, alfalfa, vitamin K, carrots, A, apples and berries, C, seeds and sunflower oil, E. Everything that grows nearby can be used. Don't buy synthetics, they destroy the internal balance. And now a bit of philosophy. A chicken is not a tool, she is a mirror of her owner. If you treat her as a machine, she will give you production, but not her soul. If you treat her as a being, she will open up a whole world to you. I learned 3 things from my chickens: patience, observation, and gratitude. Patience because results don't come immediately. Observation because nature speaks without words. Gratitude because every egg found in the morning is an act of trust between 2 living beings. When you understand this, production turns into a union, and then your chickens become your compass. If they are singing, it means everything is right. If they are silent, look for the reason. Nature does not lie. The secret of stable egg laying isn't in additives or lamps, but in respect for the cycles. Sun, food, peace, the three pillars of any living creature. If you observe them, you will become independent of stores, prices, and imported concentrates. You will have what our ancestors had, the certainty that tomorrow will be fed. And when you hold your first free egg in your hands, warm, heavy, smelling of grass, you will realize that you have returned home. This isn't just a product. It's a sign that you have once again become part of the circle of life. Knowledge survives only if we pass it on. The next vault will open soon. When they tell me that all this is romance, not economics, I smile. Because behind every real egg is a precise calculation, calibrated labor, and biological mathematics that they don't teach in agricultural universities. Let's look the numbers in the eye. An average industrial-type hen lives for 18 months. During this time, she produces 300 eggs. Then, culling. The old system considers a chicken a disposable material. But if you keep your own village hen and feed her honestly without stimulants, she easily lays for 3 to 4 years. And by the fourth year, she gives about 800, 900 eggs, nearly triple over her lifespan. And she does this without antibiotics or factory feed. The difference between efficiency and wisdom becomes obvious. The economics of freedom is built not on tonnage, but on the circle. Let's take an example from the 1980s in the Tambov region. A family of 5 kept 12 chickens, 1 rooster, and had 20 acres of land. They fed them kitchen scraps, grass, and grains they grew themselves. The average laying rate was 190 eggs per chicken per year. That's 2,280 eggs. If converted to today's prices, that's about $350 a year without any feed costs, because the feed came from the yard. Now calculate the factory option. 12 eggs a week at 120 rubles. Over a year, it adds up to a decent sum. But there you are a buyer, while here you are a producer. The difference is not just in money, but in the sense of control. But independence isn't just about saving, it's about microbiology. When you feed your chickens naturally, you build a stable ecosystem of gut flora for both them and yourself. An egg is a biological capsule with billions of enzymes and micronutrients. It is formed from grasses, soil, and bacteria that the chicken interacts with every day. Therefore, a living egg differs from a factory one not just in taste. Its biochemistry is richer. It has more vitamin D, carotenoids, folic acid, enzymes, and antioxidants. Research shows a free-range chicken's egg contains 2.5 times more omega-3 fatty acids and 3 times less cholesterol because movement, sun, and a diverse diet change the bird's metabolism. So the economic conspiracy is simple. Large corporations remove the sun and the earth from the equation because they can't put a price on them. It is profitable for them to keep you on a short leash of dependency. Feed, lamp, additives, antibiotics. They aren't selling food. They're selling fear. The fear that without their scientific formulas, you won't be able to do anything. But the truth is that it was precisely the simple backyards, grandmother's chicken coops, and villages where everything was done by hand that were the backbone of the country during years of war, crisis, and famine. When factories stood still, the chickens didn't stop laying. They saved lives. Quietly, without reports, without subsidies. Take the siege of Leningrad. Archives tell us, on the outskirts of the city, people survived thanks to birds secretly kept in basements. On 50 dri of grain and a drop of water, a hen gave an egg every 3-4 days. That was enough to keep a child from dying of starvation. Or the post-war 1947 in the steppes of Kazakhstan. When the harvest withered, but the chickens ate grasshoppers and wheat from the stalks. They kept laying, and the women boiled eggs to trade for salt. The egg became the currency of survival. These facts don't make it into textbooks, but they are in the memory of villages. Why then is this experience almost lost now? Because it doesn't fit into market logic. Knowledge that cannot be monetized is declared obsolete. But if that were true, factories wouldn't close at the first power outage, and we wouldn't depend on feed logistics. The old methods survive because they are based on what doesn't break: the earth, the cycle, sunlight, and human attention. Now for the practical part. How can you reclaim autonomy right now? Start small. Create a micro-ecosystem. Let grasses grow under the chicken's feet. Clover, wheatgrass, alfalfa. They clean the soil and serve as feed. Don't clean the yard to a shine. Leave the bugs, worms, and larvae. They are natural protein. Each hen can eat up to 150 grams of insects a day. There is your free premix. Include them in the diet, especially in summer. Next, food cycles. Everything that leaves the table goes back to the chicken coop. Husks, peels, scraps, leftover porridge. But use common sense. Don't give them anything salty, sour, or moldy. It's better to dry it out and grind it into a powder. Use this to make a winter reserve, homemade compound feed. Add ash, shells, and a little salt, and you have a mixture that is not inferior to factory feed. Now for calcium. It's not necessary to buy oyster shells. Crushed eggshells and chalk are enough. The main thing is to always keep them freely accessible. The hen herself knows when and how much to take. It's amazing. They feel minerals like a compass. If you see thin or soft eggs, it means the calcium is running out. Add ash from birch wood or dried nettle leaves. Don't forget about fermentation. A simple 3-liter jar, warm water, grain, 48 hours, and you have probiotic food. Fermented grains reduce feed consumption by 10–15% because they are absorbed better. This isn't theory, I measured it myself. And importantly, such feeds strengthen immunity and reduce the risk of intestinal infections. Now for behavior. It seems to many that chickens are brainless creatures. Error. They remember up to 100 faces, distinguish voices, and have social connections. There is a leader, there are observers, and there are nannies. Disrupt the hierarchy and you get chaos. Therefore, never introduce new birds abruptly. First, isolate them for 2 to 3 days. Let them get used to each other through a mesh. Ideally, release the new ones in the evening when the old ones are already asleep. In the morning, the flock perceives them as part of the group. This trick was used in peasant households even before the revolution, introducing by dark. It works unfailingly. Now for water and light. Water must be not only clean, but alive. It sounds strange, but here is a fact. If you put waterers in the sun, the water blooms and bacteria multiply, disrupting the gut microflora. Therefore, waterers should only be in the shade, and in winter, slightly warmed so as not to lower the body temperature. Old folks used to put a red-hot stone in the bucket to keep the water from freezing. A perfect solution without electricity. Light is the energy of life, but it shouldn't be torture. Chickens shouldn't live under a constant glow, as if in prison. I use soft lighting and make sure to have periods of darkness. Like humans, birds recover only in their sleep. This is the time when the body processes fats, strengthens bones, and forms shells. If you deprive a chicken of night, you get a burned-out bird, like an office worker without a vacation. And when you observe all this, when the rhythm of life coincides with nature, the farm begins to live on its own. Without constant costs, without purchase schemes. You become part of the ecosystem, not its overseer. The chickens start laying calmly, stably, regardless of the season. You know, I often wonder, why do people build smart homes when they can't build a smart chicken coop? After all, a chicken coop is a school of life. Here you learn patience, observation, biology, economics, and even philosophy. A chicken doesn't lie. She shows the result of your actions honestly every day in the form of one egg. It's the most transparent audit in the world. And when I look at my chickens, at their order, peace, and rhythm, I realize this is where true independence lies. Not in running from the system, but in restoring your cycle. Sun, seed, egg, life. This knowledge isn't new. It's hundreds of years old. But if you pass it on, it will live on. For the truth is simple. Civilization may collapse, the internet may go out, but a hen will still lay an egg because nature knows no crises. Knowledge survives only if we pass it on. If this story changed your perspective on the usual things in your household and revealed ancient secrets of survival, subscribe to our channel and give us a like. We are piecing back together the history and knowledge that they tried to consign to oblivion. Sow the future with us, returning to the roots. The next vault will open very soon.